Hey y'all, so don't mind me. I'm just waking up, but I wanted to share something that came to me. So I shared recently, my last video, what I do for work, and um, just waking up so inspired by it because there's so many people in the community that I work with that are fighting through some really tough stuff. I'm talking about health issues. I didn't get to share it, but one of the patients that we honored during our celebration ceremony, he is a Marine, senior, a hospital corpsman, and he helped save lives on the battlefield, basically. So, talk about PTSD. There's so much potential for that. I don't know if that's exactly what he experienced, but I'm sure had to have seen some things. But then he turned around and got stomach cancer. Had to get his stomach removed, had to learn how to live again. You know, you're talking about someone who is not just a military mind, but he used to be a guy, bodybuilder, and then this disease happens, and it strips him of everything he used to be, his entire identity. And he talked about how the work that I do, has saved his life. It's not the cure for cancer, but it saved his life because he felt like giving up many times. And I just put in perspective what we talk about here on my page when it comes to manifesting. We are powerful co-creators with the divine. And things will happen in our journey that our intellectual minds may not understand, but our soul knows that we came here to unfold in certain ways. And that unfolding involves sometimes things that we don't like, and sometimes things that are hard, and sometimes things that are, you know, extremely difficult to move through. But it does not mean that we can't still be the alchemist of our experiences, that we can't still have influence over what we co-create with the divine, right? And so he is someone who practices being supernatural. He's very aware of Dr. Joe Dispenza's work. He does meditations, and he's seen shifts happen even in his experience where doctors were saying things were looking really bad, and then all of a sudden, he's been doing the inner work and he goes back to the doctor and there's so much improvement and they don't know how or why. Because we can be supernatural. We can become supernatural when we release old patterns, when we release those, stored emotions, the conditioning of our minds and our bodies, and we surrender it to a higher power. Now, I made that sound so beautiful, but we all know that process is not a linear process. I say it all the time through all my content because our bodies have memory just as much as our minds do. So no matter what you're telling yourself mentally and intellectually, whatever you're affirming, you can't forget that you are a total being. You are made up of mind, body, and soul. So you can work on the mental, but don't forget the body because it needs reconditioning. What you feed your mind, you can learn how to work with your body as well. And there are modalities. I talk about them all the time. Nervous system regulation. You have to train your body into safety. And so for this gentleman that I'm talking about, he's had to learn how to train his body into safety because he comes from a military background, over 20 something years doing what he does. And then to get the diagnosis that he's gotten, he's having to learn how to train his body into safety after years of possible PTSD, on top of just what it means to be human and how difficult that could be even if you don't work in the military. Just what we go through in our childhood and our day-to-day lives can be a lot. I don't know, I felt inspired to share that because you never know what people are going through, and you don't know what's on the other side of a prayer, right? Like this guy, he fought through to come to travel to our event because he had gone through treatments and radiations in and out of the hospital. And even in the midst of his practicing of becoming supernatural or, just releasing old patterns, you still experience the difficulties. And he's had to fight through it in order to make it to come to our event. And I had a prayer that he would make it. And I had no clue what he would have to endure to make it, but he made it. And it just reminded me, too, that, like, you just never know what's on the other side of a prayer. This reminds me of Neville Goddard's lecture, Live in the End, where he talks about if 1,000 men must aid in the birth of a state, they will do that, and it will be so. And it's almost like he mentioned how it'll come in like a joke, because you won't be able to go look for evidence. You won't even know where to start, because God will use whoever needs to be used in order to shift things around. And so when I talk about this particular patient, the things that he had to overcome, and he mentioned that suicide was one of those things that he had to overcome in order to muster up all the strength to be at our event this past weekend. And I would have never known that would be one of the things. I mean, I knew he was going through some tough stuff, but you just never know what's on the other side of your prayer, whether you're manifesting better relationships, or you're manifesting money, or you're manifesting more abundance, and, or even health. You don't know what's on the other side, which means that things can unfold in a way that looks like it's working against what you're praying for. Things can unfold in a way that looks like opposites. We talk about this in the manifestation community a lot, when opposites transpire. Rather than looking at it as ultimate defeat, right? What we know in this community is that opposites are just the old man. It's remnants of the old man. Neville talks about this a lot as well. You are witnessing the old pattern play out. Why? Because it's been practiced for a long time, okay? You give into fears, you have your stories, you have your doubts, and sometimes that plays out a lot longer than your faith. And so you'll see things transpire in your reality that looks like the opposite of what you've been praying for. If you give into it, if you think it's defeat and you tap out, then the old man won. The old story won. But if you look at it and say, that's interesting, I know what that is. And you know what? I'm going to go back this way because I know what I'm working on. I know what that is. That's so familiar. And I could easily go down that rabbit hole. You might get sucked in for a little bit. But it doesn't matter that you got sucked in. What matters is that you pull yourself out, right? What matters is that you give yourself those new patterns, those new ways of thinking, that new routine. Talked about routines. That new routine to turn to, rather than going to the old default set state of fear, of doubt, of feeling like you're a failure and telling that old story. And I'm pretty sure that this is what this particular patient did. He mustered through. He's practicing becoming supernatural. He understands that it's not a linear process. It's not from A to B. Sometimes it's A to Z to C to D to F and all around, right? Like, life is not linear, and neither is the co-creation process. So you will have setbacks from time to time, or what appears to be setbacks. But as I always say, they are opportunities. Opportunities are disguised as impossible situations. And those impossible situations are the opposites, right? They're the opposites of what I've been praying for when they come up. But those are opportunities to exercise your faith. Faith is like a muscle. And it doesn't grow unless you exercise it, unless you face your demons, unless you face your fears. And when you face it with courage. You face it with a belief beyond your five senses. And as you do that, you'll start to notice that it crumbles. The illusion dissipates. But you won't get the dissipation unless you actually face it. So many of us like to shy away from difficult situations. We like to shy away from the things that we fear. And if you listen to the old fables and storytelling and the fairy tales, the thing doesn't go away. The boogeyman doesn't go away until it's faced. And that's with life. That's the same with life. When the difficult situations won't end, the difficult patterns won't end unless you face them. But you must face them with a new mind. Be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. You renew your mind, you can recondition your body, and now you got the Trinity on board, right? And the Trinity is undeniable. The Trinity gets answered. If 1,000 men got to move around to make it so. And so this is what we're practicing. We are divine co-creators. The same thing could be applied to recent election results. A lot of people on my timeline, and rightfully so, there's a mourning that takes place when you understand what has been at stake. And for those who voted opposite, this ain't your conversation. Back up, turn around, find somewhere else to go. But for those of us who understand what that this is more of a spiritual warfare, that this is more of a light versus dark, that we don't have to operate on these low vibrational frequencies. We've been fighting for our lives coming into teachings like manifestation, because we're not just after the things. We understand that we have a role to play in the transpiring of this planet and everything that's on it. And so we're using that to become supernatural, to learn about our abilities to be more like Christ, right? Because Jesus came and he did the damn thing, okay? He showed us the way in spite of the opposites. And Jesus was showing us that which I do, you can do greater. And the more we learn about who we really are, what we can really do, we're understanding that Jesus was like the bro. He became supernatural so that we can learn to be the same. Okay? And with that being said, he was one of the greatest metaphysicians that we talk about to this day. A religion was built around him. Jesus wasn't Christian. His name is Jesus Christ, and we built a religion around him because we were so inspired by his supernatural abilities. But he told us that which I do, you can do greater. So do not let that go over your head. You can be a better version of yourself by choosing to be a better version of yourself, by choosing to tap into your innate abilities, by choosing to learn about what you really are and exercising from that knowledge what you can really do. Recent election results are an opportunity, right? We ain't do all this work for nothing. We ain't do all this work. We don't walk for the world with Dr. Joe Dispenza for nothing. Just because the opposite came up, like Neville said, that's just the old man. Who are you going to be in the midst of all of that darkness? Who are you going to be? Because if you shrink, if you go inside and you don't play and you don't face the boogeyman, guess what happens? The boogeyman wins. So, he might be in the White House right now, but at the end of the day, you still have personal responsibility throughout your day-to-day choices, and you still can influence your world. You can influence the people in your life. You can influence every place that you enter by being your supernatural self. And that has rippling and domino effects. Don't ever think that just one encounter only stays in that one space. It doesn't. We are beyond time and space. Becoming supernatural means you're beyond time and space. If time has to collapse, you are becoming supernatural. You can collapse time just by raising your frequency and operating through higher frequencies, emitting higher frequencies. You are collapsing time, space, reality when you do this. And I ain't going to go too deep into this one conversation, but check out my page. Y'all know what I be talking about. And y'all know what we on. So don't let it go over your head. Don't let any of this, make you go back into your sleep state of forgetfulness. We practice daily so that we can constantly remember, right? Because even the great masters forgot, and they would have to constantly go into their routines and practice in order to remember. And that is what being human means. This is the great sleeping state. We come into these 3D realities forgetting what we are, and our entire mission is to remember. It's to peel back the layers that pile on, that keep us in our forgetful state, so that we can remember what we are and what we can do and be divine, because we are divine. You are already divine. Your only reason that you are not experiencing your divinity is because you do not accept your divinity. You forgot. And so you need to remember. And let this be your reminder that you are already everything you need to be to meet this moment. Whatever you see out there, it's not the final answer. You have influence, you have purpose, you have choices every single day, moment to moment, in who you're going to be. Are you going to be just of the flesh and carnal, or are you going to be divine? Are you going to be supernatural? You decide. This is your reminder. You got this.